This is Anarchast.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Now you might be wondering why you're looking at the picture of a sunburnt Englishman rather than the usual good, rugged looks of your usual host, but that's because today's special guest is Mr. Jeff Berwick. Hello, Jeff.
Oh, hello. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Now, you know what's coming next. We have to do this for the record. When and why did you become an anarchist?
Well, I think it really started when I was younger. I had a real stroke of luck. The personal computer came out around the time I was 10 years old. And it was about 1980, and I was just enthralled by it. And I was very lucky. My grandfather, who was an old ham radio operator, which was sort of the pre-sequel to the internet, he was talking to people around the world for decades over radio. He also showed an interest in it, and he was excited that I was showing an interest, so he said, I'll buy you a computer, but we don't have a lot of money, so we're going to buy one from Vietnam. It was an Apple II Plus clone computer called a Unitron, and I had to build it myself. But once I was on it, it was like a whole new world to me, and so I really started not caring about school too much, which was a good thing because of all the indoctrination they do in those schools. And by the time I was about 14, probably getting into high school, I approached my mom, and actually the principal called, and they said, he's really not coming to school very often, what's going on? And I said to my mom, listen, can we do a deal here? I'm not interested in 99% of the stuff going on there. I'm not interested in getting beat up every day. I'm really interested in these computers, but there's no computer classes or anything at that point. It was still very early on. Yeah. And so I did a deal with my mom, and I said, okay, because she still wanted me to get that government certificate of,
Badge of obedience.
Badge of obedience, yes. And so I said, okay, I know you want me to get this, so I'll do that. But I'll just go for the tests mostly. And what I would do is I'd just read the textbook the day before, and you would retain enough information to pass the test. And the rest of the time I just spent on my computer. And then at night also, while most people are watching their programming on TV, and there's no accident they call it programming, I missed all that. I was just on my computer all day, all night, just searching the world, discovering new things constantly. It was so exciting. And so I think because of that, I sort of didn't get all the programming and indoctrination that a lot of people get. And then when the internet came out, I was so excited again. I said, I've been waiting for them all to put all these computers together. It's taken them too long, but I'm glad they finally did it. And I started a financial website in Canada called stockhouse.com, and it still is the top financial website in Canada. And by 1999-2000, it was worth $240 million. Wow. It had 250 people working for it in 8 different countries. And but then a few months later, after the tech bubble collapsed, it was almost worthless. And I would go to people, I'd say to MBAs and stockbrokers, what happened? And almost all of them said the exact same thing. They just shrug and go, that just happens sometimes. And I just couldn't accept that as a, there must be more than that.
Just animal spirits.
I didn't know Keynes at the time, but if I talked to a Keynesian, he'd say, it's just animal spirits, or in the end, we're all dead anyway. Yeah. So I decided, okay, I've got a little bit of money now. I sold this internet company. I'm going to buy a sailboat and try to sail around the world and try to see what's going on with my own eyes, and not through the lens of the media. And during that process, I managed to sink the sailboat in El Salvador, and I just kept going for about 3 or 4 more years. Along the way, I was constantly reading on the internet, and I came across Austrian economics, and that's what finally explained so simply, so easily, so obviously what had happened. Just an increase in the money supply by Alan Greenspan for the Y2K thing.
Build a bubble.
Yeah, build a bubble, pop it. And along the way also, I was traveling a lot, and I came across an article by Doug Casey. I'd never heard of him before. Maybe I heard of him, but I didn't know much about him. And the article really caught my attention because it was about immigrations and customs people, and it was saying, don't be nice to these people. They have no right to ask you where you're going. Yeah. And, I'd been feeling this, but I didn't know you could actually think like that. I said it to myself in my head. I still remember saying, I didn't know you could think like this. And I went on to read a lot of Doug Casey. And then I actually had the luck to have dinner with Doug Casey in Vancouver soon after. And he very grandfatherly asked me a bunch of questions. At the end, he said, in Doug Casey style, you know what you are, don't you? And I said, no, what am I? And he said, you're a libertarian. And I said, what's that? And I didn't even know, I'd never heard the word before. Spent another few months reading libertarian stuff. And then, of course, it's a natural evolution. Once you start to realize how little we need the state, then you start to realize we don't need the state at all. And actually, the world would be a much better place without the state. I read a book. The book that turned me into an anarchist was The Market for Liberty. Yeah. Very small. It's actually on the internet for free in a PDF format. And it shows what the world would be like in a state without the state. And it's glorious and it's exciting. And I was just enthralled. And ever since then, I've been an anarchist.
So that was your kind of red pill moment. Do you ever regret taking that red pill? I mean, now you could have been a successful businessman in Winnipeg with your hockey season ticket, freezing all winter and 2 weeks of sun in summer. Do you ever wish you'd taken the blue pill and not taken that red pill?
Not at all. They say ignorance is bliss, and there is definitely times where you kind of wish you didn't know everything that's going on. Not that I know everything, but you know, I've been studying the world for 20 years now. I'm aware of quite a bit more things than a lot of people are, just because they don't have the time to look into these things, or they don't even want to know about them. But other than those moments where you just you look at people and they're just like happy on the beach all day and they don't know anything about the world, they're just happy. You look at them sometimes and go, I wish I could be like that, but you can't really go back. Unless I want to do some sort of lobotomy or something, you know, like you can't get this information out once it's in. And once you know this information, it's really hard to ignore it. Yeah. Because you see every little problem around you, you see the cause and no one else does, and you just want to try to help so much. Yeah. And so, no, I've been more excited to have taken the red pill than to not have taken it.
Yeah, that's the thing with Mises, isn't it, with production as well, where you see 5, 6, 7 steps ahead of where the final consumer product is created. Now, you're creating a place called Galt's Gulch in Chile. It can't be built in Colorado anymore. Does that tell us that you were ever a kind of Ayn Rand objectivist for any period of time?
No, I actually have never read a complete Ayn Rand book, but I do know exactly what's in the book Atlas Shrugged, and I know the concept. The concept was the world became much more statist, socialist. They started taking from the productive people and giving it to the unproductive people, and how they all moved away at one point. They just had enough, and so I know enough about what she wrote about to know and to really build Galt's Gulch today. But no, I was never an objectivist. I totally missed that part. We've had so many people on Anarchast who, when I asked them how they became an anarchist, what was the start down that road, they said Ayn Rand. And I really respect her for that. And my mentor, Doug Casey, used to be fairly good friends with Ayn Rand, and he really admired her. And she sounds like an amazing person. But no, I never went down the road to objectivism, and I can't really even say I totally understand it. It seems more like a religion to me, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it is a bit more of a religion, but it does help people. She helped me because I kind of read Atlas Shrugged, and I just saw one word at the back, Mises. And from that, this was early internet days, then got into Mises and then Mises.org, and that really helped everything. Now, on a recent Cambridge House interview, an absolute classic, you absolutely terrified the life out of the interviewer, and she kept calling you extreme. So, but all we want is to be extremely polite. We just want a peaceful society of totally voluntary cooperation. But we get tainted with this anarcho-communist kind of thing, you know, the people with the black hoods and throwing and being violent, whereas we're completely peaceful. How do you think that we can shake off that anarcho-communist thing and just push this peaceful, totally voluntary, cooperative society idea?
Well, I think we already are. The internet shakes out bad ideas quite quickly. And we had, when we first started Anarchast, we had a lot of anarcho-communists come on and say, you guys aren't anarchists. And very quickly we debated with them, and they literally scurried away. Because to me, you could take off the anarcho in front, because they're just communists. Yeah. They're violent people who they don't like the system, but they want their own system. Yeah. And they want us to adhere to their own system. Whereas us anarcho-capitalists, we don't like the system either, but we don't want any system that we control and we control other people. We want it all to be voluntary. Yeah. And so yes, it's very, and also I have to say about the word anarchy, and I got criticized quite a bit for calling this Anarchast, because people said there's a bad connotation with that word. And I said, well, there's, you know, bad connotations of lots of words, and lots of words get totally misconstrued, mostly thanks to the state and the media, who for decades now, anytime someone breaks a Starbucks window, say it's an anarchist.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So I think, you know, we have to take a stand and hold up these words sometimes. You look at other words, of course, liberal doesn't...
Awful the way they've stolen that from us, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, there's a saying, and I forget who said it, that if you can control the words, you can really control the people. Yeah. And that's really the case. But thanks to the internet, we've sort of rooted out these anarcho-communists that they're not really around. They've gone to this Venus project now, which is sort of like Marxism with robots. And but you know, more
they are robots.
Yeah,
all of them.
That's true. But more and more, this word and this philosophy is getting out there, and it's not being construed the way it used to be. You're starting to see the word being used in a good way, often in the media even now. Not necessarily on CBC or CBS or the U.S. media, but Russian Today, for example, which is now one of the better mainstream media. Which who would have thought that 20 years ago? That
it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really incredible. But I think she called me an extremist. But there's, the thing that's extreme to her is that I'm not towing the line that everyone in society is towing, and it scares her that I might change her world. That's what she finds extreme, I believe.
Yeah. Now, in the world, we have maybe, I'll just make up a number, there's maybe 10,000, maybe even 100,000 of us. I'm going to call us Matrixians, people who've taken the red pill. There might be another 10,000 or 100,000 people who are on the other extreme of the normal distribution. They are the rulers of the world. They're the G20, NATO, the EU, all those things. I'm going to call them, for want of a better phrase, the Illuminati. So we've got 10,000 of us at one end, we've got 10,000 of them at the other end, and 7 billion people in between. How do we take over the normal distribution? How do we spread our ideas from our island of a totally peaceful society, of cooperation, to get these 7 billion people who are all kind of suffering from Stockholm Syndrome and Oslo Syndrome, and take them out of the hands of the Illuminati?
Well, I think you got the numbers wrong. There's probably 100 or 10,000 people who actually know the anarchist philosophy very well, but most people in the world are naturally anarchist. Yeah. You've been here in Mexico for a while. Have you heard anyone talking about socialism or voting? Yeah. They don't care. Most people just don't care. They consider the government to be a nuisance. So we have a lot of people already kind of in our camp, but they don't necessarily understand the underpinnings of what we're talking about. They just see it as being natural life, and they don't really want anything to do with the government. Yeah. I think as well, we're going to have a real opportunity. This status system has really been going gangbusters for about 100 years now, and longer than that really, but really they've got it down to an art now. The US government and the Western governments have it down to an art, but all of the things they've been doing, the central banking, the debt, the money printing, it's all headed for collapse. Yeah. And that's really going to be our opportunity. Again, on Anarchast, we've had a few guests just recently say that they realized and became anarchists after 2008 because that really shook them, because they thought that this financial system was totally secure, that the US dollar is going to exist forever. And when they realized that wasn't the case, they started to think about other things. And now that was just the first wave of this crisis. You can imagine when we actually have a collapse, how many people will really start to think about what is really true or not, and what they've been told that they believe is true that just ain't so. So
do you think that there's a chance of a kind of world of freedom? Because we've seen with the Weimar Republic, when that collapses, we get Adolf Hitler. You read, you see things like the Hunger Games movies, and it feels very, very true, that the kind of messages they're portraying. Do you think we can have the whole world, or do we just have to go to pockets and hide there until things get better?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever have the whole world, but I definitely have hope for it. To me, humanity is progressing, and not like the progressives, not using that word, but actually advancing in a good way. Not many people today can imagine having some archduke in 1914 get assassinated and going and with flamethrowers lighting people on fire and bombing and garroting people. Like, that was like a weird stage in human history where we were still, that was still something that people might do. Nowadays, your average person doesn't want to do that. They've seen what the free market can bring. Yeah. iPads were transmitting to the world from one of my houses in Mexico.
Beautiful red wine.
Yeah, and they can see that non-violence is a much better way than violence. And as well, as far as wars go, in the old days, it made sense to maybe go in and rape all the women and steal everything. Like, it maybe made some actual sense to do that, like you would get more than you would otherwise. Yeah. But that doesn't work nowadays, and people are realizing the way to get what you want, excuse me, is to create things and to have voluntary transactions. And there's nothing really to steal anymore. Let's say someone came in and they said, we're going to take over Acapulco. Well, what are they going to have? They're going to have a semi-old iPad. Like, this stuff it's not like they're stealing all our gold anymore and stuff like that. Yeah. I really see humanity as going through a massive transition right now, and I think it's beautiful. We just have to get through this final collapse of the status idea, and it's mostly held in the West nowadays.
Yeah. One of the other problems that we have is we have, in our 10,000, probably 9,900 people are men, and we have 100 ladies. How can we get to a more kind of natural balance of, I'm not saying we should be politically correct like Gramsci and have everything to be kind of female 50-50%, but how can we get to a more natural human balance and get more ladies involved in our movement?
Well, we just finished our Anarchast Young Female Beautiful Anarchist month, and we must have interviewed at least, if it's not 10, it's close to 10. And those were just, cream of the crop type people, Amanda Billy Rock and Ron Paul Girl and some very well-known anarchist women. And of course, we've already had on one of the top female anarchists of all time, Wendy McElroy, who's just a real treasure for our movement, and others as well. We've had other women on. So they're actually out there. The thing about females, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, is that we're all run by genetics. That's why a lot of guys like to have sex with a lot of women, because we want to spread our seed. And women don't want that. They want to find one guy and keep him, in general, a strong or a well-off guy or a rich guy who can help raise the kid through till he's mature. And because of that, women have been genetically programmed somewhat to not go against the grain as much. So I think they're actually out there, but they're scared to say it because it's a little bit harder for them, because they're sort of a bit more programmed to not want to rock the boat. In the old days, if you had a tribe and there was 50 people and 2 people thought they should do something totally different, they'd probably just get killed by the rest of the tribe. Yeah. So people were very cautious to try to say they believe something different at that point in time. So I believe that's sort of the main reason we haven't seen a massive amount of women in our movement so far, but I really believe they're out there. They just haven't really come out and said it too much yet. Yeah.
There's a great book, it's called I think The Fatal Conceit by Hayek. Now some people debate whether Hayek wrote it or not, but it's a great book anyway. And it describes this kind of pre-Stone Age kind of thing, and how these ideas, we moved to trade, and then religions then helped us come up with commandments to be peaceful and everything else. But one of the great things you're doing is you're helping people with TDV and Dollar Vigilante. You're offering people strategies and a newsletter and various other services. What strategy should each individual adopt over the next few years to survive the oncoming Keynesian collapse? And I'm thinking particularly of people who might not be able to come to the world's most dangerous city of Acapulco with a portable skill. How do those people survive through this collapse and then move on to a better time afterwards?
Well, I think there's so many things you can be doing. I think number one is just realizing this is going to be happening, because a lot of people are going to be completely broadsided by this. So as long as you're aware that this is sort of happening, and make your own decisions. Don't just trust what we're saying or what I'm saying. Make your own decisions, but being aware of what's going on is number one. And so if you're aware of that, you can protect against it somewhat. If you're a young person, I really recommend to get out there. It's a lot easier now than during and after this collapse to get out there. It's going to be a lot harder in the coming years as the borders get closed, capital controls come in, as the state is in its final days and trying to control things. And, it's kind of odd. I hear from a lot of younger people that, it's kind of scary, and, I only have a little bit of money and... Well, you think back to the people who arrived at Ellis Island 100 years ago. The average person arrived with $90 in today's dollars. Average person. A lot of them didn't have shoes. They didn't know what's there. There's no internet to find out what's even there. Yeah. Something has happened to us in the last century that has made us a lot less willing to take risks. You look back at so many people have done so many amazing things, taken so many risks in history, and it's just been almost... We've almost become domesticated a lot. Yeah. And sort of my point is, you're going to have to deal with this collapse either now or later, and it's going to be easier to do it now. Yeah. And you can go on the internet, especially at TDV. We have something called TDV groups. We've got anarchists around the world who have expatriated. They've started a business, or they've found a life somewhere else. They're doing well somewhere else. You can go on there, ask them what it's like there. Many of them are very open. You can say, hey, I'm a young guy or a girl. I just want to find something to do out there. Many of them will be very open to it. We've actually found many jobs for many people around the world. So yeah, there's many options, and that's really the main thing is don't be scared to take some risks, because it's going to be a lot easier now than later. You think about it in the old days, if you wanted to go from the UK to Acapulco, that you're talking about a few months, and you might have to, you know, eat your cousin in a snowbank along the way. You know,
now in the Andes, you've crashed.
Now you just book a ticket online, and you know, you borrow some money from your parents or something if you don't have it, and just get out there. We've had a lot of anarchists. You've met some of them. Yeah. They've come here and they're renting a $300 apartment, and one's a web designer. You know, they're finding things to do, trying to be productive. And another thing is the cost of living outside of the Western world is so much less. You can really survive on almost nothing in many places.
Yeah, I think portable skills are the key, aren't they? Something that you can possibly do over the internet, but then that leaves us with an Achilles heel. You said earlier that the internet was a salvation for you and a kind of great tool. But if I was one of the Illuminati, the G20 people, what I would be thinking now is how to shut down the internet, because that's going to shut us down. It's going to shut down mobile workers who are going to have to then go back to their tax farm and live there. Do you think that they'll be trying to turn the internet off? Do you think it's possible that they can turn the internet off?
I think it's possible, although the internet was designed to never be able to be turned off. But for the majority of people, they could turn it off for a period of time. I don't think they can. I think they let the genie out of the bottle on this one. You know, first of all, thanks to Al Gore for creating the internet, but you know, there's so many people on the internet, so much commerce is done over the internet now, including a lot of the companies that most of these world-controlling people own. They don't want to turn that off. And if there's going to be one thing that'll get that fat, you know, 21-year-old kid living on his mom's sofa playing Xbox Live all day off the sofa and into the streets, is if they turn off his Xbox Live and they turn off his Facebook. You know, they can't do it now.
It'll be a revolution in every child's bedroom.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's the only thing that would get young people really motivated at this point to do something and get out there and be angry and not necessarily be violent. Yeah. But to actually get out there and like say, hey, that's enough, is turning off the internet. So I don't think they can do it now. Yeah.
Another thing that we're just starting to see, because we're always going to see these things on the extreme edges of the normal distribution to start with. We've seen Gerard Depardieu defect from France to Russia. We've seen even an ex-president of France, Sarkozy, defect from France to the UK, which I think is a strange thing to do, living in the UK. And we've even seen Tina Turner defect from the US to Switzerland. Do you think that these are the signs of the impending collapse? And the other thing as well is, do you think that places like China and Russia are moving towards a gold standard of money, and they're trying to maybe push the US off the pedestal a little?
Definitely. First of all, you know, all of human history are these collectivist states going through cycles. They never last very long. The average age of an empire is about 200 years, as calculated by someone, but that sounds about right. So they always start small. They always start fairly free. All the people create a tremendous amount of wealth. Then the government comes in and says, hey, we should take some of this for the good of the people and you know, distribute it, which mostly means destroy it. Because they're taking it from productive people and giving it to unproductive people. Which means they're basically destroying that wealth. And actually, they're also at the same time teaching the unproductive people never to be productive. So this is a natural thing. This has been going on since Rome. Obviously, with Rome, did very well at the beginning. Then they had bread and circuses. And then people were literally escaping from Rome, going to the barbarian lands just to get away from the state. Very normal. You know, we're seeing this all the time. You look at the Soviet Union, you brought up the Soviet Union and Russia. You look at them. They were a terrible place to be in the 1980s. People were trying to escape, just trying to buy jeans somehow, you know. And they collapsed. The collapse was a little bit hairy, and I wouldn't want to be there unless I had a large amount of guys with guns and take over a few gold mines, which a lot of people did, and that's how they became billionaires. But after that, it started to progress again, and now people are actually defecting to Russia. It's unbelievable, amazing time.
Isn't it? Defecting to Russia, absolutely unbelievable. Now, my red wine there is starting to run out now, so we need to kind of move towards bringing this to a close. But I've just got one last question. You, with your TDV Enterprises, have you got any big expansion plans that you're thinking of to help people get through this Keynesian collapse?
Yeah, absolutely. We've obviously got a large base in the US and actually all around the world, but we don't have any other foreign languages. And we've been approached recently. We're going to start up TDV in France, obvious choice with an income tax rate of 75% at the top now. So many people are trying to get out. When the past president, escapes,
The past president can't stand it. Incredible.
like you can pretty much tell that where that's headed. And we're probably going to start I just got approached about doing a German language site, and you're actually thinking of starting one for the UK in specific.
Yeah, that should be interesting. So that'll be a lot of fun. I think we've talked about a lot of things today. So thank you, Mr. Jeff Berwick, for being on Anarchist.
Thanks for having me.
For Anarchast, your site for anarchy on the internet. So goodbye, love, peace, and anarchy.